As I've stressed repeatedly, our old relationship, based on steadily increasing integration, is over. The questions now are how our nations will cooperate in the future and where we in Canada will move on.
Prime Minister Mark Carney there, set to meet with President Trump in Washington on Tuesday to talk about trade and a future security relationship. Carney says he expects difficult but constructive conversations. So what more can we expect out of that meeting? And can the Prime Minister convince the President to lift tariffs on some Canadian goods? Joining me now is Everett Eissenstat. He served as the Deputy Director of the National Economic Council during the first Trump administration, and he's now a partner at the law firm Squire Patton Boggs. Nice to see you again, Everett.
Thank you.
Appreciate you being here. The Prime Minister is trying to manage expectations about Tuesday's meeting. He said we shouldn't expect white smoke to come out of it, in that it's not going to all get settled. What do you think should be expectations out of this meeting, either for the Americans or the Canadians?
It's a very important opportunity. It's the first time that the Prime Minister will be able to meet with the President, having the mandate from the election. So I think that's been a bit of an impediment to having the kind of negotiations that will be necessary to move the relationship forward. So it's a good starting point, but I think you're right. It's not the ending point. It's unlikely that the relationship will be sorted out within a single meeting, but it's certainly a good start.
We are told, too, by the Prime Minister that it is a substantive meeting. It's not just, 20 minutes in the Oval. There will be officials on both sides. There will be conversations that last a little bit. Is that a sign to you that there is some desire here from the White House to get on a different path with Canada when it comes to trade?
I think the administration is working to get on a different path with a lot of different countries on trade. And as you know, they have this, there's a 90-day pause on the reciprocal tariffs, and there's ongoing negotiations with many different countries. So you need to look at it in that context as well. But I do think it's an important opportunity. Certainly, time is of the essence. There's, the 90 days is ticking. There's a number of important relationships that need to be resolved during that time period. So I'm not surprised that there's a good substantive meeting. I think it's an excellent opportunity to have the kind of conversation necessary to really move the trade and economic relationship forward.
What would be, although, as I said, the Prime Minister is managing expectations, what would be, do you think, a reasonable outcome here? If some of the tariffs were removed, or if there was a conversation about them ending, what would make sense? Because we also understand that the two leaders want to discuss a broader security and economic relationship going forward. But for this first meeting, should the focus be on tariffs, and what tariffs in particular, would you think?
It's really a great question. And of course, it's not an easy answer because there's so many different buckets of tariffs in place, right? You've got the 232 tariffs, which are the national security tariffs linked to imports. That's the one dealing with autos and timber and copper, all important to the Canadian economy. And those are really identified and driven more by the President's desire to reshore and ensure there's a robust supply chain within the United States. So those are a little bit different. Of course, you have the 10% universal tariff, which is more about revenue raising than the reciprocal tariffs. And to that complexity, you've got the special relationship with the USMCA and how is that going to evolve. So these would be, a conversation to sort out all those different elements would be difficult. I don't think it's going to happen overnight. There are different, it's actually a very good sign, and it's good that the relationship is broader than just trade. And I think when the administration is working with a lot of different countries, part of what they're discussing are elements of the relationship beyond trade. And I would not be surprised that defense and other issues are going to be on the table as well.
Yeah, it sounds like the Prime Minister is also expecting that. He also mentioned defense spending. We talked a little bit earlier in this program about Donald Trump's approval ratings and how they're not great 100 days in. I wonder whether you think that is helpful for Canadians, that there is perhaps some leverage there because the President knows that Americans are struggling to see the end game here in terms of what he's doing.
I don't really think I would see it that way. This is there are a lot of different parts of the administration's agenda that are just getting started. I mean, the tariffs were front-loaded. That's been the a big focus of the first 100 days. In fact, I think there's been a tariff action or threat of an action every 3 days. So it's been very dynamic. But there's some other parts of it as well, including, the budget, which was just released. The tax debate is just really kicking off in the Congress. So there's a lot more to come. I wouldn't take a flashpoint on the approval ratings as a referendum on the relationship or even on the policies to date. They're more the tariffs are concerning, of course, because it does result in change. Yeah. But I, as I mentioned, I think there's a lot more to come that will have an impact as well.
What the president in a interview this morning with Meet the Press again repeated the thing about the 51st state, and this prime minister has made it clear that kind of conversation, that kind of rhetoric is not acceptable to him, and that in order to have a conversation about the substantive issues, he wants to see the president respect Canada's sovereignty. What is the likelihood that we might see just a change in language, do you think, from the president? And how would that help the relationship and the negotiations going forward?
Oh, well, obviously, it's very bothersome in Canada, the rhetoric, and I understand that. I don't honestly know whether he's going to continue to use that rhetoric or not. It is, for him, it's a moniker of what he's trying to achieve, which is it's really, there's a historic element to this too, as you probably know. This isn't the first time that tariffs and this concept of the U.S. relationship with Canada has been in play. So it's very difficult. I think it's more of an emotional response. Mm-hmm. I don't conceivably see any scenario where that would actually happen. But I do understand how disturbing it is and how emotive that language can be. Yeah. I don't know if he's going to use it again or not.
What as someone that knows the administration, knows the president's negotiating style a little bit, Everett Eissenstat, what do you think should be the prime minister's sort of goal number one on Tuesday? What would be your thought or advice to him on that day?
I'd say two things in particular. One, pragmatism top over emotions. I mean, this is a pragmatic discussion, and we really need to see it from each other's perspectives. This president wants to achieve a different type of relationship. It's obvious to me in hearing some of the comments from the now prime minister that he does as well. He recognizes that interdependent relationship is just not going to be what it used to be. And so there's other parts of it. There's security discussions, there's border discussions. There's a real recognition about the need for resilient supply chains. So there's an opportunity there to open the aperture beyond just the traditional trade discussion that I think could be very, very fruitful.
Everett Eissenstat, always nice of you to make the time for this program. Nice to see you again, sir.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for the opportunity.
Thank you.
He called me. He was very nice, and I congratulated him. He had a victory. It's a very close victory. It's there's no majority or anything, so that's going to make things a little bit difficult, I think, for him to run. But he nevertheless had a victory, and he's a very nice man, I think.
Do you plan to talk to him about making Canada a 51st state?
He wants to come and see me. He's going to come this week or next week.
So will you talk to him about making Canada a 51st state, annexing Canada?
I'll always talk about that. You know why? We subsidize Canada to the tune of $200 billion a year.
That was the president just this morning on NBC's Meet the Press, talking about his phone call with Prime Minister Mark Carney and his meeting on this Tuesday, and the president's ongoing desire to, he says, see the Canada become the 51st state. Trump has seen his approval ratings plummet, though, hitting a record low for the first 100 days, in part due to his trade war and his budget cuts. And that's where we will start on our American Roundtable this week. We're delighted it's back because the election is over. Melody Barnes is the executive director of the Karsh Institute of Democracy in Richmond, Virginia. Tolu Olunripa is a national political reporter for The Washington Post and in the U.S. Capitol. Nice to see both of you.
Great to be with you. Thank you.
Great to be here.
Okay, so there's lots going on as usual down there, and I will get to the meeting between the Prime Minister and the President. But let's talk about the President's approval ratings, Melody, and how far they have fallen, and whether he seems to be adjusting or whether he can afford for this to continue happening, whether there's any sort of acknowledgement of this reality now.
Well, first of all, again, it's great to be with you, and you're exactly right. about what's happened over the course of the first 100 days. President Trump came in and had an historic high rating for President Trump at the beginning of his administration. And within the first 100 days, he now has the lowest approval rating of a president at this point in his presidency. And it's interesting when you peel back and look behind those numbers and you ask Americans questions, what you'll find is that a majority believe that this is a chaotic period. Some believe that's good, but many, including independents and those who are Democrats, also say that they find this a scary period. Very few, a majority of Republicans, but very few independents and Democrats find this also to be an exciting period. And then when you look further behind the curtain, what you see is consistently on the issues that President Trump used to win election, the economy, his policy on immigration, that he's now got a higher disapproval rating than an approval rating. And that is also consistent with those who talk about his management of the federal government and the U.S.-Ukraine war, trade, and other issues. So this is a significant issue for the president. Not surprisingly for President Trump, he is saying, look, I inherited a bad economy from President Biden. Things that are good that are happening are because of me. Things that are bad that are happening are because of him. So, and he's also said that he wants to remain consistent with his trade policy. So we'll see what the coming months will bring. But we certainly have seen a significant decline in the first 100 days.
Yeah, he was certainly pressed in that interview on Meet the Press this morning to kind of see if Americans would just have to endure this pain from the trade war and for how long. Tolu, I also did not give you your whole title there when I introduced you. You're, of course, the White House bureau chief for the Washington Post. Tell me how much approval ratings matter to the president, do you think, given midterm elections coming eventually, and whether that's something that he will adjust for?
Well, he was also asked on his NBC Meet the Press interview whether he was going to run for a third term. It is unconstitutional in the United States to run for a third term. And he essentially said that even though people have asked him to do that, that he has no interest in actually doing that. So he is, for the lack of a better word, a lame duck president. He doesn't really have to worry about re-election. He does have to worry about the midterm elections where his party could lose control of Congress. But this is a president that has always been very aware of his approval rating, always been very aware of the polls. He would talk about the polls from campaign rallies and talk about when he was up in the polls, and often, selectively select the polls that are good for him and ignore the ones that showed him on the decline. Yeah. But I do think he's aware that his popularity has declined, that a lot of his policies are unpopular, especially when it comes to the economy, when it comes to his tariff policy. We have seen people within his administration try to dial that back, try to soothe the markets by saying that things are going to be easier, that this approach is unsustainable, and that they're going to change course and strike deals with all these various countries. And even though he continues to talk about, making Canada the 51st state, he has even softened some of his language towards Canada and talked about making deals and talked about trying to soften some of the tariffs and even some of the car tariffs that he's put in place, removing some of those. So he is shifting, adjusting to the low approval rate, but not necessarily doing it in a significant.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine this president in particular not being aware of his own popularity and approval ratings. Whether he moves and adjusts, I think is yet to be seen. Okay, Melody, let's talk about how the federal spending cuts are maybe feeding into all of this. Proposal for billions of dollars in cuts. Does the administration, in your mind, still have the support to do this?
Well, we're about to see that start to unfold as they work their way through the budget. What we're starting to see, and Congress has, and particularly the House of Representatives, has control of the federal purse strings. That is one of the great powers that they have under the Constitution. The House Republican Appropriations Chair, the person who has main responsibility for guiding this through, has already started to signal that there are concerns, that, as he says, there are aspects of what President Trump wants that are politically unworkable. And there are other Republicans, Senator Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, for example, who said some of the proposed cuts are going to make this very, very difficult for the most vulnerable people in my state. So what we're going to see is whether or not a Congress that for the first 100 days has generally stepped back from its constitutional prerogatives, has not guarded them jealously, whether or not they're going to step forward as we see big cuts and a policy deliberation process that has to bring them to the table, whether or not they are going to differ with the administration and try to broker some kind of compromise. I think going to what Tolu was just talking about, as the president's approval ratings start to slide, it may embolden some on the Republican side of the aisle to make further statements along those of the lines of Appropriations Chair Cole, Senator Murkowski, and others.
Excuse me. So, Tolu, tell me how difficult it might be for the president to get the budget approved before the next shutdown. And now that we're talking, too, about these cuts, it occurs to me I haven't seen or heard much from Elon Musk lately, and I don't know whether I should read anything into that as well.
Well, Elon Musk is definitely on his way out of the door when it comes to his federal role in cutting the federal budget. He's essentially handed the reins over to Congress and put the hot potato in Congress's hand, saying that Congress needs to take up the mantle of federal spending cuts. So far, as Melody said, there's not a sense that Congress wants to do this. They know they have constituents that rely on these programs, that rely on this federal money, and that gutting the federal government by this amount would really upset a lot of the people that they serve and really endanger their own reelection. And so I do think it will be very difficult for President Trump to actually enact some of these. It's not clear how much he wants to put his political capital on the line behind budget cuts. He's talked about not wanting to cut Medicare or Medicaid or Social Security. And so there's not very much left to cut after you decide to take those things off the table. And he knows that a lot of the things he wants to cut are actually popular. And so maybe this is an exercise in which he puts some numbers down on a federal budget and then moves on to tax cuts and other things that he's more interested in. Cutting spending and cutting federal programs that people like are not necessarily the things that keep Donald Trump happy and keep him excited about the role.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about the visit from Canada's Prime Minister on Tuesday with the President. We're told that it is a substantive meeting. It's not just 20 minutes in the Oval. There's various people involved in a meeting that will last several hours. Melody, how important do you think this meeting is? What do you think are the opportunities here for the President and the Prime Minister?
What I would give to be in that room on Tuesday. I think this is going to be a really interesting and certainly important meeting for these two leaders to start to get a sense of one another. I mean, President Trump, including statements that he made this morning on Meet the Press, is not backing off from his comments about the 51st state, commenting that he believes Prime Minister Carney is a nice man, and he's ready to have conversations with him. At the same time, Prime Minister Carney, who I had the pleasure of meeting about 10 years ago, is no stranger to difficult economic moments and also making difficult deals. And he has said, we've got plenty to do here in Canada, and this is an opportunity with the United States to start to have a conversation, but I'm not rushing this conversation. This is an opportunity to reset the relationship. What happens in the room, I think, will be far more interesting without the cameras than what happens in front of the cameras. And so we'll have to see if they take that opportunity and also if the language coming out of the room starts to bring the temperature down or not. I don't know that I believe that it will.
The Prime Minister said Friday, Tolu, that don't expect any white smoke. I have about 30 seconds in terms of what you'll be watching for.
As Melody said, I think being a fly on the wall in that room would be really, really exciting. President Trump does tend to do some of his foreign policy before the camera, so I'll be watching to see how he interacts with the press and with Prime Minister Carney when the reporters are in the room, and whether or not he engages in some of these tough discussions that he's going to be doing behind the scenes as well.
Well, you are the one person of the three of us, Tolu, who might be a fly on the wall. So if you find out anything interesting, do let us know. We'll be sure to read you the next day. Good to see both of you. Thank you for being here. Appreciate it a lot. Melody Barnes, Tolu Olunaripa, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.